Good I might. I mean, hello, fight fans. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Jess, of course, the MMA Girl, and welcome to my MMA space. We are going to be covering a very important card this week because we are going back into UFC. We've got another 6 weeks non-stop UFC, and to celebrate that, we are starting off with a predictions video and picks for UFC Perth, of course, happening this weekend on Saturday for most of us, but on Sunday for a lot of us as well, especially the Aussies who are watching it on Sunday morning, even though it's happening in Australia. Don't ask why. Anyway, we have Carlos Ulberg, the New Zealander, taking on the new Dominick Reyes. The new Dominick Reyes has been on a tear recently, and we cannot wait for that fight to happen. And I personally cannot wait for that fight to happen. So let's get into the latest news on this fight card and all the prelim fights to not miss out on. So we have in total 8 prelim fights on this fight card. So a lot of fights to not miss out on. And of course, the first prelim fight is from our women's strawweight division in the UFC. And this fight is, of course, featuring Loma Lookboonmee. And she'll be taking on newly signed Alexia Tainara. And if you guys remember, Alexia Tainara, we saw her defeat Molly Meatball McCann at UFC London this year. Of course, we saw Molly Meatball McCann retire in front of the London crowd, in front of Paddy Pimblett, and it was indeed Alexia Tainara that was responsible for her losing her last fight at the UFC, of course, via submission. This fight's going to be electric. I recommend you guys tune in from the start of the prelim fights because this is going to be very exciting. Also, not to miss out on is Colby Thickness, of course, coming back after his debut fight at the UFC. Didn't end up the way he wanted to. He, of course, lost by unanimous decision to Ilia Toporia's brother, Alexander Topuria, in his debut fight in the UFC. So Thickness is, of course, Australian. He's been training with Alexander Volkanovski very closely. So he is apparently the strongest and the best we've ever seen him. So I can't wait to see Thickness come back into the cage. And, of course, in his home country of Australia, there's no better place to do it. He'll be taking on Josiah Musasa, who has a record of 8 victories to 1 defeat, and Thickness has a record of 7 victories to 1 defeat as well. Not to miss out on. We always have Jamie Malarkey coming back, another Aussie, of course, who is a great fighter, a very exciting guy in the cage, and he'll be taking on Rolando Bedoya. This is going to be a crazy fight, guys. Cannot wait to see these lightweights take center stage in UFC Perth, in their octagon, in front of the Australian crowd. Hopefully we'll see Alexander Volkanovski make an appearance in Australia for UFC Perth. And of course, he'll be supporting all of his Aussies in this card. Andre Peloski's back. He'll be on this card as well in the second to last fight on the prelim card. He currently has a record of 13 victories to 4 defeats. And he'll be taking on Cam Rowston, of course, another Aussie who is in the middleweight division, looking to make a statement against somebody like Andre Peloski. We'll see what happens in this fight. Of course, 12 victories to 3 defeats is a great record for now. And he's coming out of Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. So, of course, looking to make a statement in his home country. And for the ESPN featured prelim, we won't be able to say that for much longer, of course, until December. We'll be able to say ESPN featured prelim. But once we get into January, it may be the Paramount featured prelim. Or maybe they won't have any featured prelims. Who knows? But Navajo Sterling will be headlining, of course, the ESPN featured prelim on this prelim card for UFC Perth with a clean record of 7 victories to 0 defeats. And he's taking on Rodolfo Bellato. They're both a huge challenge for each other. But for Navajo Sterling, who is more of a novice in the UFC compared to Rodolfo Bellato, this is a big challenge, and this will be a big win for him if he gets the W in this fight. Of course, for Rodolfo Bellato, this will be his comeback fight after his shambles that he had in the cage with recently retired Paul Craig. Paul Craig, of course, we saw retire at UFC Paris, and I was in the flesh, of course, to watch him retire and put his gloves on the mat. And Rodolfo Bellato hasn't been able to step back into the cage since his last fight with Paul Craig. So this is his chance to redeem himself and also make himself look better, of course, in the cage. But that's going to be a tough challenge against a guy like Navajo Sterling, who, of course, trains at CKB. He's a New Zealander. He trains with the likes of Dan Hooker, Israel Adesanya, some real big names, some real big fight IQ guys in CKB, one of the biggest and best gyms in New Zealand and all of the continent. So for me, this is going to be a real challenge for Rodolfo, but I really am excited to see how Navajo Sterling does against someone as experienced as Rodolfo Bellato in the light heavyweight division. That was it for my prelim highlights, not to miss out on. Let's get into the main event and our picks for the main event fighters. Tom Nolan, in the first fight, of course, of the UFC Perth main card, will now be taking on Charlie Campbell, who is coming on short notice to compete against Tom Nolan. Of course, Tom Nolan at 9 victories to 1 defeat. His new opponent, Charlie Campbell, at 9 victories to 2 defeats. This is, of course, going to be a bigger challenge for Charlie because he is the underdog who is coming in short notice. Tom Nolan's had a full camp. I believe he's still got the fresher advantage and could pull off a second or third round finish by KO in this fight to kick off the UFC Perth card. We then have Jake Matthews with his record of 22 victories to 7 defeats taking on Neil Magny with, of course, a huge record of 30 victories to 13 defeats. Being the veteran with the biggest fight IQ of the card, we can expect fireworks in this fight. And I believe that Neil Magny is a real danger for Jake Matthews. But I think Jake Matthews could pull off a unanimous decision here and maybe a finish in the third round. We might be seeing Jake Matthews submit Neil Magny in the third, but I think he'll get the UD in this fight. What do you guys think of Neil Magny on the UFC Perth card? Let me know in the comments down below. For the third to last fight on the UFC Perth card, we have Jake Jenkins taking on Ramon Tavares. Now, Jake Jenkins, of course, being the Aussie representative in this fight, is 31 years old. He has a record of 13 victories to 4 defeats. And Ramon Tavares has a record of 10 victories to 3 defeats. Tavares is, of course, a dangerous opponent for our Aussie Jack Jenkins, but I believe Jack Jenkins is a more skilled striker out of the two of them. He has more agility and he is able to more precisely hit his opponents. I believe that Tavares is a little bit more sloppy in his striking, has a little bit less accuracy in terms of striking. So I think that will work to Jake Matthews' advantage in this fight. So I'm going to say UD for Jack Matthews, maybe a third round finish, but I'm going to go for the UD for Jack Matthews against Tavares, and he will outstrike Tavares for sure in this fight, in my opinion. So the new co-main event, having lost the original co-main in Junior Tafa versus Ibo Aslan, we have got Jimmy Crute, of course, representing Australia as he should be, taking on Ivan Erslan. Now, Ivan Erslan is a dangerous fighter in the light heavyweight division. He has currently a record of 14 victories to 5 defeats, and Jimmy Crute is cruising back into the light heavyweight division with a record of 13 victories to 4 defeats and 2 no contests. Now, of course, Jimmy Crute is a very dangerous man on the ground. If this fight stays on the feet, maybe Ivan Erslan can cause him more issues. However, once this fight goes to the ground, it's over for Ivan Erslan. And I think this fight will go to the ground. Of course, he knows how to take his opponents down, Jimmy Crute, and I believe he'll get the second or third round sub in this fight. I think he's on a tear right now, and he'll continue to get those wins in. And if he doesn't get the sub, he'll get the ground and pound TKO over Ivan Erslan in this fight for the co-main of UFC Perth. And for the last fight, of course, the main event of the evening, Carlos Ulberg versus Dominick Reyes, of course, the legend himself. Carlos Ulberg is 34, Dominick Reyes is 35. There's not a huge age gap here. When they had their presser in Australia a while back, the precursor for this fight, Dominick Reyes was being quite humble. However, Carlos Ulberg was being quite chirpy on the side and saying, old timer this, old timer that. There's not a huge difference in your ages, guys. There's just a huge difference in when they started fighting and how long Dominick Reyes has been in the UFC. So maybe he's saying old timer because he's a worn down fighter, which is true. Of course, his body has had a much more difficult ride than Carlos Ulberg has. And maybe in one sense or another, Carlos Ulberg having less defeats than Dominick Reyes proves that Dominick Reyes has been worn a bit more than him. However, Dominick Reyes has 15 victories to 4 defeats and Carlos Ulberg has 13 victories to 1 single defeat. Carlos Ulberg is a very strong, vicious striker. He likes to piece apart his opponents. He's not going to go in there and rush you because he cannot take the risk to get himself in danger. So he's going to take things slowly, build up this fight, pick you apart, and he usually gets the UD in quite a few of these kinds of high caliber fights. We last saw him, of course, in UFC London fight Jan Bakowicz at light heavyweight, of course, and win via UD. And it was a close one, however, but he got the win. And that was a huge win for his career, a huge win for his record. And he's looking to come into this fight and take over the light heavyweight division and take on someone who is on a tear and someone who is a legend in the light heavyweight division, of course, having fights against John Jones. People like Dominick Reyes don't come around every 2 years. These are people that can boost your record if you beat them, but also can be very dangerous in the cage once you guys are locked in there, just you and him and the ref. Now, stats wise, they both are the same reach, the same height. As I said earlier, the age is the same, basically. Dominick Reyes has a bit more UFC IQ and experience than Carlos Ulberg. Ulberg, of course, coming from New Zealand, very strong, very dominant fighter. He owns the octagon when he's in there with you, and you have to just go along with his speed and his rhythm. I think Dominick Reyes, however, is a more dominant fighter once he gets the rhythm going, and he goes a bit faster. He gets there a bit faster than other opponents, especially Carlos Ulberg. So I think there will be errors that he'll make in the start of this fight because he'll try and get that early finish, or at least try and get some early damage on Carlos. However, that being said, I believe that Dominick Reyes will win this fight. He is, of course, the underdog here due to the fact that he's not on home soil and due to the fact that Carlos Ulberg, of course, is on a much longer winning streak than himself, of course. Carlos Ulberg has not lost a fight since 2021. And, of course, Dominick Reyes is on a 3-fight win streak. So he has lost quite a few fights, come back in, recentered himself, and got those victories over some big opponents to rise back up into the light heavyweight rankings. So this is a big fight for Dom because Carlos Ulberg is a huge light heavyweight contender. If he can get the win here, he'll be in contention for the title. And of course, the title is being put on the line next month. So there are a lot of things being decided, of course, in that heavyweight division. We have the title fight between Ankalaev and Alex Pereira happening on the same night that we're getting Yuri Prochazka taking on Khalil Roundtree for the number one contender spot. But maybe this fight could be a precursor for another number one contender's fight. And I hope that this fight will be as decisive as it needs to be for us to be able to make that decision quite easily. So, to conclude, I believe Dominick Reyes will win this fight via KO in the 3rd or 4th round. I think that both men have great cardio. This may go the distance. He may get the finish in the 2nd or 3rd, but I think he'll warm up. He'll stay at Carlos Ulberg's rhythm. He won't go in too quickly because he knows what Carlos Ulberg is capable of. And he's not underestimating his opponent either. But I believe that Carlos Ulberg will lose this fight either via unanimous decision or by KO. And I believe that Dominick can KO Carlos Ulberg with his punching power that he has KO'd so many in the past with. So that's my opinion for the UFC Perth main event. Of course, I'm predicting an upset for the Aussies. For the main event, this is going to be the biggest upset, of course, for the whole card, seeing as Carlos Ulberg, if he loses, then the Aussies, of course, go home with a sore feeling in their stomachs. But I hope that the Aussies will love the fights, will love the evening, and will all love what we see, and that great fighting will happen. But that's my prediction for UFC Perth main card and the main event, of course, between Carlos Ulberg and Dominick Reyes. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Am I wrong? Am I right? What do you guys think of the fights on this card? Are you happy with the lineup we have? Is it stacked enough for you guys? Let me know in the comments down below. Like, comment, subscribe as usual. And we'll be back next week. I'm, of course, on the road. I've been on the road for quite some time. I've been doing quite a few events in France at the moment. But I'll be back with my usual podcast rhythm next week. And we'll be going over, of course, all the events from this Saturday's show, this Saturday's main event, and all the rest that needs to be discussed next weekend. Bye. See you then.